Hello, beautiful Libra. Today, I want you to listen with more than your ears, because there may be something within you that has been quietly asking to be acknowledged. This message is not here to give you a temporary comfort or another promise that disappears as quickly as it arrives. It is an invitation to pause and notice the difference between keeping everything peaceful and actually feeling at peace within yourself. Let yourself become still for a moment, because beneath all the weighing, considering, and trying to understand everyone else, there is a quieter truth about what you need. If this message found you at a moment when you have been questioning a relationship, a decision, or even your own instincts, allow yourself to be curious about that feeling, rather than immediately talking yourself out of it. There are parts of your inner world that already understand when something is out of balance, even before you can explain exactly why. Perhaps you have spent so much time considering every side of a situation that your own side became the one voice you kept asking to wait. And perhaps what you need most is not another answer from outside yourself, but the permission to hear what your own heart has been saying underneath all that careful consideration. When I think about the energies surrounding Libra, I do not see balance as simply keeping everything in place. I see it as learning how to let two truths exist at once. You can care deeply about another person and still have needs of your own. You can value harmony and still speak when something feels wrong. And you can love someone without carrying the entire weight of the relationship by yourself. That distinction matters because real harmony does not require one person to continually become smaller so everyone else can remain comfortable. It asks for movement, listening, honesty, and a willingness from both sides to meet somewhere in the middle. There is something you may have been hoping to feel more clearly: emotional security, freedom from old doubts, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your relationships reflect your values rather than constantly challenging them. These things do not need to arrive as some dramatic outside event for them to become real. Sometimes the first sign of change is much quieter, like realizing that a conversation you once avoided now feels necessary, or recognizing that a connection you kept defending no longer feels reciprocal. What begins to shift is not necessarily the entire world around you, but the way you decide what deserves your energy, your attention, and your heart. And this is where I want you to look honestly at the anxiety that may have made you question yourself. Have you ever called something peace because confronting it felt more frightening than continuing to carry it? Have you ever softened your truth, delayed your needs, or accepted less consideration because you were afraid that asking for fairness would disturb the relationship? There may have been a person or situation where sweetness covered an imbalance, where everything looked acceptable from the outside, while something inside you quietly knew that the exchange was no longer equal. You do not have to turn that realization into anger. You do not have to make someone the villain in order to admit that something hurt you. Sometimes the most honest form of closure is simply recognizing that a relationship can contain affection and still be unable to offer the mutual care you need. What was withheld from you does not have to be repaid through revenge. What matters is that you stop withholding it from yourself, whether that means respect, honesty, consideration, tenderness, or the freedom to say what you truly feel. So take a breath and ask yourself something gently. Who or what situation have you already begun to forgive, even though part of you is still carrying the lesson? What caused you pain, disappointment, or a sense that the balance between you and another person had quietly shifted? And instead of asking only whether you can keep that connection, ask whether you can remain fully yourself inside it. If you are ready, you can write in the comments, "I, Libra, choose balance, self-respect, and relationships that honor the truth of who I am." Let those words be less about making something happen outside you and more about acknowledging a choice that begins within. You are allowed to receive the same consideration you naturally offer to others. You are allowed to be listened to without having to explain your feelings perfectly. And you are allowed to want a relationship where care moves in both directions instead of flowing endlessly from you towards someone else. If this message resonates, let that recognition settle gently rather than rushing past it. There is something powerful about realizing that your worth does not increase when someone chooses you, and it does not decrease when someone fails to see what you bring. What you are learning now is not how to become harder or less compassionate. It is how to remain open without abandoning yourself in the process. You can be gracious without being endlessly accommodating, loving without becoming responsible for another person's emotional balance, and understanding without turning every boundary into something you need to apologize for. Your next layer of growth begins in that subtle space where kindness and self-respect stop competing with one another and begin to belong to the same life. Think about the parts of yourself you may have set aside while trying to preserve connection. The preferences you softened, the conversations you postponed, the feelings you translated into something easier for someone else to accept, and the moments when you said, "It's okay," because saying what was actually true felt too complicated. None of those experiences make you weak, and you do not need to judge the version of yourself who made those choices. Perhaps you were simply trying to protect something you cared about with the tools you had at the time, and now you are learning that protecting your peace can also mean protecting your voice. There is a different kind of security available to you when you stop measuring it by how successfully you can keep everyone around you satisfied. It comes from knowing that you can face an uncomfortable truth and remain grounded within yourself, that you can survive another person's disappointment without abandoning your own values, and that you can walk away from an arrangement that asks too much of your spirit. This does not mean every difficult relationship must disappear, or that every disagreement is proof of incompatibility. It means you are becoming more discerning about the difference between a relationship that asks you to grow and one that repeatedly asks you to disappear. Let yourself imagine what reciprocity would actually feel like. Not perfection, not constant agreement, and not a life where nobody ever misunderstands you, but a connection where your feelings have room to exist, where compromise moves in both directions, and where honesty does not automatically threaten belonging. You may discover that what you've been calling too much was simply a reasonable need that had been expressed in a place where it could not be fully received. And once you recognize that distinction, you can begin making choices from clarity rather than fear. So breathe slowly and return to the question at the center of this message. Are you preserving peace, or are you participating in balance? There is a difference, and your heart may already know it. You do not need to force an answer or make a dramatic decision simply to prove that you have changed. Sometimes transformation begins when you stop negotiating against yourself and start allowing your own truth to have an equal place at the table. The life you are rebuilding is not necessarily one where everything becomes perfectly smooth. It is one where your relationships, choices, and sense of self can begin reflecting one another more honestly. You can move toward beauty without using beauty to hide discomfort, toward love without using love to excuse imbalance, and toward connection without sacrificing the person who is doing the connecting. And as you begin to honor that quieter truth within you, the things you are willing to receive, protect, and participate in may begin to look very different. What you have quietly given, hoped for, and carried in your heart has not been meaningless, Libra. Some of what you have been seeking may begin to reveal itself not as a dramatic reward, but as a clearer understanding of what you are willing to accept, what you are ready to receive, and what no longer belongs in the space you are creating for yourself. You do not need to be perfect before you are worthy of love, consideration, opportunity, or peace. Your life, with all its contradictions, lessons, tenderness, and resilience, already carries a value that does not depend on how well you keep everyone else satisfied. As you continue moving through this shift, pay attention to the doors that open through clarity rather than pressure. An honest conversation, a relationship that suddenly feels more reciprocal, an opportunity that respects your abilities, or even a quiet realization about what you truly want can become meaningful signs that your choices are becoming more aligned with who you are. Not every important change arrives loudly, and not everything valuable needs to announce itself as a miracle. Sometimes the most significant gift is recognizing that you no longer have to chase what requires you to abandon your own balance just to keep it. There may be moments when you question whether you are asking for too much, simply because you have become accustomed to asking for less. You might even feel surprised when someone offers you the same patience, care, honesty, or consideration that you have so naturally given to others. When that happens, let yourself receive without immediately wondering what you owe in return. You are allowed to experience relationships where generosity moves in both directions, where affection does not come with hidden conditions, and where being valued does not require you to perform for it. The seeds you have planted through patience, kindness, and self-awareness are not only about what another person may give back to you, they are also growing into a clearer sense of who you are when you stop measuring your worth through another person's response. And still, old patterns can surface, especially the familiar temptation to return to what feels comfortable simply because it is known. You may recognize an old fear telling you that speaking honestly will create conflict, that setting a boundary will make someone leave, or that choosing yourself will somehow make you less loving. This is where your real transformation becomes visible. You may find yourself standing between the ease of keeping things pleasant and the deeper peace of being truthful about what you need. The choice does not have to be dramatic, and it does not require you to become cold or distant. It simply asks whether you are willing to remain present with yourself while you care about someone else. You are learning that harmony has little meaning when one person must continually swallow their feelings to create it. Libra, you are not the same person who once believed every uncomfortable feeling needed to be resolved by making someone else happy. You have begun to recognize the difference between compassion and over-accommodation, between compromise and self-erasure, between patience and waiting indefinitely for someone to meet you halfway. You are creating a more discerning inner space now, one where honesty, respect, tenderness, and genuine reciprocity have room to exist together. When an old fear tells you to shrink your needs again, pause and remember that protecting your peace does not require you to betray your heart. Let yourself receive. Receive the kindness you once dismissed as ordinary, the consideration you may have thought you had to earn, and the love that allows you to remain yourself instead of asking you to become easier to handle. You do not have to question every good thing simply because you are unfamiliar with receiving it without overgiving in return. Open your heart gently and remind yourself, I am ready to receive what is mutual, honest, and worthy of my whole heart. From there, something begins to change in the way you move through connection. Giving no longer has to mean emptying yourself, and receiving no longer has to create a debt inside you. Your relationships can become places where two people bring their fullness, rather than one person constantly compensating for what the other cannot offer. Even the difficult pieces of your past can become useful, not because every painful experience was meant to happen, but because you can now understand what those experiences taught you about your boundaries, your values, and the kind of love you want to participate in. There is also a deeper kind of love worth recognizing here. It is not meant to arrive and fill some missing piece inside you, because you were never incomplete to begin with. The right connection simply has room for the person you already are, honoring your sensitivity, your intelligence, your complexity, and your need for both closeness and individuality. If you have ever wondered whether you could be loved deeply without having to become endlessly agreeable, let that old doubt soften. Love can be gentle without being fragile, devoted without being possessive, and close without taking away your freedom to remain yourself. The love that truly fits you will not require you to silence your instincts in order to preserve the relationship. It will not ask you to keep explaining why your feelings deserve consideration, nor will it make you feel guilty for needing reciprocity. Instead, there can be a quiet sense of meeting two people, bringing their own perspectives, making room for one another, and allowing disagreement to exist without turning it into a threat. That is a very different kind of harmony from simply avoiding conflict, and it may ask you to trust yourself more deeply than you have before. You may also notice that certain possessions, habits, expectations, or connections no longer feel aligned with the person you are becoming. You do not have to reject everything familiar simply because you are changing, but you can become more selective about what receives your time and emotional attention. Ask yourself whether something brings genuine peace or merely temporary relief from the discomfort of making a different choice. Your values deserve a place in your decisions, even when someone else does not immediately understand why you are choosing differently. Peace and love do not have to be distant ideas that you spend your life pursuing. They can become qualities you practice through the choices you make, the conversations you are willing to have, and the relationships you decide to nurture. Today, you can open your arms to a life where beauty does not hide imbalance, where connection does not demand self-abandonment, and where your own needs are given an equal place beside the needs of those you love. Let that intention settle into you gently, like soft evening light across a room, giving you enough clarity to see what deserves to remain, and enough courage to honor what your heart has finally learned. Now close your eyes for a moment, Libra, and place your hand gently over your heart. Listen to the rhythm beneath your palm and notice what happens when you stop measuring yourself through someone else's response to you. Each heartbeat seems to say, "I am here. I have listened, I have loved, I have adapted, and I am learning to choose myself without losing my tenderness." What is awakening within you is not simply a small adjustment or a passing change in perspective. It is a deeper realization about who you are when you no longer confuse harmony with keeping everyone comfortable, and when your own needs are allowed to have a place at the table. The parts of you that were softened into silence by fear of conflict, rejection, or disappointing someone are beginning to speak again, and with them comes a clearer understanding of what you actually value, what you genuinely want, and what kind of connection feels honest to your heart. There may be people who do not understand this change in you, especially those who became accustomed to your flexibility, your patience, or your willingness to meet them halfway, even when they rarely cross the distance themselves. But their discomfort does not automatically mean you are doing something wrong. You do not have to make yourself smaller simply because someone else preferred the version of you who questioned her own needs before expressing them. And you do not have to soften every truth until it becomes invisible, just to preserve a pleasant atmosphere. Remember this, Libra. Real harmony does not ask one person to carry the weight of keeping everything peaceful. A relationship can look beautiful from the outside and still leave you emotionally exhausted if you are always the one adjusting, forgiving, waiting, explaining, or making room. Let the old leaves fall where they need to fall, not because every ending is destined or every departure carries some grand cosmic purpose, but because sometimes what leaves your life simply reveals what was already out of balance. And as that imbalance becomes easier to see, the dreams you once kept quiet about begin to change shape. Perhaps you have wanted a life where love feels mutual, where your work is respected, where your voice matters, and where you can make choices without constantly wondering how everyone else will react. Those desires are becoming less like distant wishes and more like an inner compass, quietly showing you what deserves your attention and what no longer deserves all of your energy. You may discover that you do not have to fight for recognition or endlessly explain why something hurts you. The right opportunities, honest conversations, and relationships built on mutual care can become easier to recognize when you stop trying to make every situation fit. And when you begin choosing from that clearer place, something inside you may whisper, "I do not have to abandon myself to belong here," because you are finally understanding that self-respect and connection can exist in the same room. If this journey resonates with you, you can leave a simple affirmation in the comments. I, Libra, choose balance without abandoning myself, and I welcome relationships built on truth, respect, and reciprocity. Let those words be less about making a promise to the universe and more about hearing yourself clearly, perhaps in a way you have not allowed yourself to for a long time. You are giving language to a choice that has been forming quietly inside you. You do not have to chase after every opportunity, every person, or every possibility simply because it appears beautiful at first glance. Some things shine because they are truly aligned with you, while others shine only because you have spent so much time hoping they would become what you needed them to be. Your discernment becomes stronger when you allow yourself to pause, feel what is happening beneath the surface, and ask whether the exchange is genuinely mutual. There may still be moments when old insecurities return, especially the familiar fear that saying what you really want could disturb the peace. You may feel tempted to accept less, smooth over an uncomfortable truth, or reopen a door simply because closing it feels harsher than remaining uncertain. When that happens, remember that discomfort does not always mean you have made the wrong choice. Sometimes it is simply the sensation of finally choosing honesty after becoming accustomed to accommodation. You are learning to recognize the difference between peace and avoidance. You are learning that compromise can be beautiful when both people participate in it, but draining when one person continually bends while the other simply recedes. And perhaps the deeper shift is this. You are beginning to understand that your kindness does not become less genuine when you place a boundary around it, just as your love does not become less loving when you refuse to disappear inside someone else's expectations. So allow yourself to receive, Libra. Receive consideration without immediately wondering what you must give back. Receive affection without questioning whether you have earned it, and receive support without feeling that you must repay it before you are allowed to enjoy it. You can quietly say, I am ready to receive what is mutual, honest, and nourishing, and let that statement settle into you without forcing anything to happen around it. There is a beautiful difference between being chosen and choosing. You've spent enough time wondering whether someone else will recognize your value, whether a relationship will remain, whether an opportunity will validate what you already know somewhere inside. Now your attention can begin turning toward the choices that reflect your own values. Because when you know what you are available for and what you are no longer willing to sacrifice, the path becomes clearer without needing to be forced. The love that belongs in your life is not meant to repair some missing piece of you. You are already a whole person, carrying your own history, tenderness, intelligence, contradictions, and quiet strength. Healthy love adds depth to that wholeness. It does not demand that you trade your identity for closeness, and it does not ask you to keep shrinking your truth so another person can remain comfortable. If you have ever wondered whether you could be loved deeply while still being fully yourself, let that question breathe for a moment. Imagine a relationship where consideration moves in both directions, where difficult conversations do not automatically threaten the connection, and where affection feels less like something you must secure and more like something two people consciously keep creating together. That kind of love does not erase individuality. It gives two complete people enough room to remain themselves while still choosing one another. And this applies beyond romance too. It can touch friendships, family bonds, professional partnerships, and every place where you have learned to measure your worth through how well you keep the atmosphere pleasant. You may find yourself releasing habits, connections, or expectations that once seemed necessary simply because they were familiar, while making more room for relationships and environments where your voice does not have to compete with your desire to keep everything calm. What matters now is not when some perfect change is supposed to arrive. What matters is the quality of the choices you are beginning to make when no one else is telling you what you should want. Each time you honor your own truth without becoming cruel, each time you listen without abandoning yourself, and each time you choose reciprocity over one-sided effort, you are creating a different kind of balance from the inside out. Now place your hand over your heart once more, and imagine two sides of the scale slowly returning to their natural position. You do not have to force either side downward, and you do not have to keep adding pieces of yourself just to make the picture look even. Simply notice what feels too heavy, what has been neglected, and what might become lighter if you finally allowed yourself to make a more honest choice. Then imagine a wide, softly lit space opening before you, with two paths meeting beneath an open sky. One path carries the old habit of keeping everyone pleased, while leaving your own truth waiting behind you. The other asks for greater honesty, greater discernment, and the courage to accept that not every connection can remain exactly as it was. You do not need to rush toward either path, because this moment is about seeing clearly enough to know which direction still feels aligned with who you are becoming. Look back with compassion at the relationships, disappointments, and choices that taught you these lessons. Honor the moments when you stayed longer than you should have, the times you swallowed words because you were afraid of conflict, and the occasions when you called something peace because admitting it was painful would have required a different decision. Those experiences do not have to become evidence against you. They can become information, helping you recognize what mutuality feels like and what imbalance feels like before you lose yourself in sides again. Now lift your head and breathe more freely. next step toward the life where connection does not require self-erasure, where beauty is not merely something you admire, but something you help create through honest choices, and where peace comes from alignment rather than silence. You are not becoming colder, Libra. You are becoming more discerning about where your warmth belongs. You are no longer required to play a supporting role in relationships where your needs remain permanently negotiable. You can participate, listen, love, collaborate, and compromise while still remembering that your voice has equal weight in the conversation. Every choice you make from that awareness becomes a quiet declaration that your relationships must have room for both people to breathe, speak, grow, and be seen. There is no need to become hard in order to become strong. Your sensitivity can remain. Your appreciation for beauty can remain. Your instinct to understand different perspectives can remain. But they no longer have to come at the cost of your own clarity. The deeper freedom available to you is not freedom from connection. It is freedom to connect without betraying what you know to be true inside yourself. If something in you feels awake as you hear these words, allow that recognition to stay with you. You do not have to treat it as proof that some external event has been guaranteed, and you do not have to turn it into another expectation to carry. Simply let it remind you that there is a part of you capable of noticing when something is balanced, when something is reciprocal, and when something beautiful is asking you to choose yourself as honestly as you choose others. If your heart resonates with this message, leave this affirmation in the comments. I, Libra, choose to honor my worth without abandoning connection, and I welcome relationships rooted in truth and reciprocity. Let the words belong to you first, before they belong to anyone else. And as you continue listening, remember that the most meaningful shift may be the one happening quietly in the way you speak, decide, love, and respond when the old instinct to keep everyone happy rises within you. You do not need to force your life into perfect symmetry. Balance is alive. It moves as circumstances change, as relationships evolve, and as you discover new truths about yourself. What matters is that you remain willing to notice when the scales have tilted, willing to make adjustments without shame, and willing to let your own needs count as part of the equation. So when you encounter love, opportunity, or a new direction that feels promising, do not ask only whether it looks beautiful from the outside. Ask whether there is room for you inside it, whether your voice can remain intact, whether care moves both ways, and whether the connection allows you to become more yourself rather than less. That is where your discernment becomes powerful, and that is where the balance you've been searching for can begin to feel less like an idea and more like something you practice with every honest choice.